toast to Charlie. In fact, I probably had a few too many toasts this weekend. But be that as it may,
It's only Saturday afternoon.
22. So be that as it may, the reason, frankly, we're here, right, is I asked folks to come to just celebrate, the vision that Charlie Weigand had. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about who Charlie Weigand was and why it's so significant. The contribution he made to establish Sigma Gamma. So Charlie grew up in Ozone Park. I think he was born in 1923. And he, so like many people his age, he misrepresented his age in high school to be able to join the forces so he could serve overseas, and he enlisted. He was in the Air Force, and he was a sergeant gunner. He was, those old time, those bombers, those planes, you see that badass in the back who's sitting there gunning, that's what Charlie Weigand did, right? And he was good at it. He flew 29 combat missions, and in this course of his service, he interacted with many people, including African Americans and other people. In fact, he told me that some of his best plane mechanics, right, were guys who were African Americans who he befriended. And so after he finished up his 2 years in the service overseas, he came to Oswego, and he enrolled here, and he lived. Back in those days, they had these things. Literally, they were barracks. And they're pretty cool pictures if you can see them. So he lived in this area called the barracks, and he was going to join another established fraternity at the time in 1947. Okay, so this dude came from the war, right? Shooting down people, right? And then he came to Oswego, and he wanted to join up with some like-minded fellows, and he was going to join another fraternity, and that other fraternity had a policy, like other organizations did at that time, that they didn't admit people who weren't just like them. So Charlie was like, I don't think that's cool, right? And so one of his friends who lived in the barracks with him was a guy named Charles Kernan. And Charles, he was a black man, and he was Charlie Weigand's friend, and he couldn't pledge this other fraternity. So Charlie was like, that's fucked up, and so he didn't. And what he did is he went around. I mean, I'm speaking bluntly here, but the bottom line is Charlie had this idea that, post World War II in 1947, hey, why don't we get a group of guys together and talk about what the model fraternity should be, right? So Charlie and his buddies posted flyers around campus, and in the fall of 1947, 26 guys showed up, right? And they all sat in a room, kind of like this, in a small cabin by Sheldon Hall, and they hashed out their ideas for what the model fraternity should be. And it's pretty cool that they did that. And a lot of the things that they talked about that night still remain in effect today, right? They established traditions, even this is my pleasure master paddle from 1986, but the shape of this paddle, the colors of the paddle, the whole deal, they thrashed all that stuff out that night, right? Everything, right? And so it would be, we don't have enough time to go into all the things that Charlie and his visionary founders, kind of hashed out, but they did a great thing. They established Sigma Gamma, right, for legacies of people. And so here we are, 75 years later, we're celebrating the history of Sigma Gamma and the life of Charlie Weigand. So yesterday was a huge day for Gamma, right? Because of certain circumstances, Sigma Gamma had to take a little stint in the penalty box, right? But we got ourselves out of that penalty box. In fact, I asked directly at our meeting yesterday, right? Gamma's back, right? And the answer I got was, yep.
22 and 22.
22 and 22. Right?
All right, let's go.
So Gamma is back, and we invited some other organizations here. I can't control who comes and who doesn't come. I will say I'm thankful to see you gentlemen. I'm thankful to you ladies. right? Sigma Gamma is a very inclusive organization, and one thing I want to make clear before I stop talking is that, you know, you've heard about the Jackie Robinson story, right? About the Brooklyn Dodgers branch. Ricky was the GM, and he brought up Jackie Robinson to be the first African-American baseball player in 1947. And Charlie Weigand did the same thing, right? There were no black pledges in any organization before Charlie Weigand said to his friend Charles Cannon, you should come in with us. We're going to develop a new fraternity. And that's pretty cool, right? So while Jackie Robinson was breaking barriers in all of baseball in 1947, Charles Cannon was breaking that same barrier here in Oswego and setting the example. And that's something I'm darn proud of, and I think you guys should be too, right?
Yeah,
like, Sigma Gamma people could be all kinds, but we're not racist, right? We're not. We're good people who like to have a good time. Maybe sometimes we have too good a time, but we like to have a good time. We like to have a good time, and we treat people the right way. That's why we're all gathered here in this room today, okay? So there's a couple things I want to point out. Number one, I want to say thank you to alumni Joe McInerney. His nickname is Loaf, I believe. He pledged in spring '87, and he lives out near Charlie, his family. So he represented the fraternity at Charlie's service. The Gamma Alumni Fund sent flowers. Mike Joseph organized that, and at his funeral, okay, were these colors. These are the first ever Sigma Gamma fraternity colors. Okay. And back then, back in the day, they wore sweaters, right? It wasn't yet casual, but they wore sweaters. So when the fraternity first started, they purposely chose orange, okay, as one of the colors because they didn't want to be confused with the established green and gold color scheme, like the hockey team. They wanted to stand out at first, okay? And they accomplished that with this color here. And then after a few years, after Gamma was an established organization, they switched it to green and gold, and we've been green and gold ever since. And personally, I think green and gold is the best combination. It's great, okay? But these are the first ever set of colors. So at Charlie's funeral service, with the Gamma Alumni Fund paid to get this framed by this company in Arizona. And so Joe McInerney brought this to Charlie's service. So everyone that attended the service out in Arizona saw this. And we have this.
Joe's watching, by the way.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. So we have this,
It's like 8 brothers watching right now.
we have this narrative plaque that. So I don't yet know where in the house we're going to put this. That's up to the bros to find a good place for it. It's sitting on these easels, which very helpfully Joy let us borrow. We're going to give them back to her. But this narrative tells a little story about Charlie and the fraternity, which I encourage you all to read. Okay. Also has this QR code. You scan it and you get taken to the Sigma Gamma website, which has a lot of information about the fraternity and traditions and whatnot. Anyway, we want this to go somewhere nice, and we want this to go somewhere where people can read it. This isn't going to do any good. So, it has to be somewhere where people can read it. Okay, so you guys will figure that out. And you know, I don't think any gathering honoring Charlie's life would be complete if we didn't take the time to read.
So you can say they have a toast.
Well, we're going to do that too. You know what? Let's start with that. Let's have a toast first. Let's have a toast first. Here is everyone take your assorted beverage. By the way, if you're underage, I don't recommend you consume. Yeah. So, anyway, okay, we have some things to cover, but let's take a minute to toast. Here's to Charlie Weigand, okay, and here's to Sigma Gamma, okay? Okay, so, in 1949, 2 years after the fraternity was founded, Charlie composed, and you know what was cool was over the years I would talk with Charlie. He would call me up randomly out of the blue. I never knew when he would call. He would call, and I'd be like, "Holy shit, it's Charlie on the phone!" Right? And I was always happy to hear him, and we'd talk about different things. He always wanted to kept up on what was going on in the fraternity. He was a feisty guy. But back in his college days, he composed the Sigma Gamma Creed, okay, in 1949. I may be reading this twice today, but that's okay. I'm going to read it now because the words are important, and it's important to hear them. And so he composed this in 1949, and he had a gathering at the Pontiac Hotel, which was on West First Street. I don't know if it's still there. I don't think
Still there.
it's still there.
Still there next
Cool.
to the YMCA.
Okay, so the Pontiac Hotel was the place where organizations would gather and have certain things. So they had a ball in 1949, and at that ball, Charlie, there's actually a picture of it right over here. Charlie got up and he read this, so I'm going to read it right now. This is the Sigma Gamma Creed, and it's important, okay? Now, I made it clear, perhaps a little too clear, yesterday's meeting, 22 and 22, right? What that means is we're going to have 22 new brothers in 2022. Gamma took a little stint in the penalty box, bullshit, but we got put in the penalty box, and we're out. Like a hockey player, right? We're out, and now we're ready to score.
That's right.
And everyone in this room that's a college student, okay, is going to be walking around with copies of these in their back pockets, okay? And you're going to hand them out that explains why you should be a Gamma Bro, okay? Having said that, this is the creed. I'm going to read it. It's important, okay? All right. We believe that all men are really on this earth for no other reason than to live in harmony among their fellows on an even basis, truly equal in every respect. We further believe that no person, regardless of his knowledge, can call himself superior if he believes that there are human beings inferior to him. We believe that all prejudices, whether they be national, religious, or racial, can be overcome by the efforts we exemplify. We are proud of our great feelings for goodwill among men. We strive on to higher heights of scholarship, ever mindful we are to teach those yet to be born a better way of life. We carry our example of scholarship and goodwill to all people every day of our lives. We are brothers united in a great fight against bigotry and prejudice wherever it exists. We are united by the great ideal that we are here to help each other carry on the great endeavors that Sigma Gamma teaches. We are one to the other, bound together. We are the spirit, the ideal of Sigma Gamma. Sigma Gamma Fraternity Creed, adopted 1949, Charlie Weigand. Those are some pretty powerful words, right? And to really make them mean something, it just means being good to other people, right? And we want other good-minded people to become Gamma Brothers. It's not rocket science, right? It's a formula.